welcome to the Icehouse podcast. I am Bryar Stewart, the Community Manager, and today we have Brett Roberts with us, who is the Managing Director of Business IQ, his own business, but also a Business Innovation Advisor at Callaghan Innovation, and our facilitator on digital transformation, which is our newest Icehouse offering, starting soon. So really looking forward to this conversation with Brett. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Exciting, looking forward to it. Really dug deep and got some juicy questions in here, so it's going to be good. But like to start with some quick fire questions to get the ball rolling. And the first one is, book or podcast that you recommend?
Both, actually. So I thought about this. Anything by Bill Bryson, book-wise.
Ooh.
Awesome writer.
Yeah.
And podcast, Pivot podcast with Cara Swisher and Professor Scott Galloway is awesome.
Great, love it. Coffee order?
A large trim flat white with sugar in it.
Cool. A room of 5 or 100 people?
Both. I really like getting in a small room and having a conversation with a small group of people. But I also really like presenting to larger groups and kind of, showing them something they haven't seen, or show them something in a way they haven't thought of it before, or racking them up slightly before I send them out the door. So both of those.
Love it. And you do just that. One thing on your bucket list you want to tick off?
I've often thought about doing a really long, like 1 or 2 year RV tour around the United States and Canada.
Cool.
I don't mind doing that.
Awesome.
Probably need a gun, but yeah.
Yeah. Born with your strengths or developed them?
Probably a combination. I love talking. Anyone that knows me will tell you that. And I used to get told off a lot as a kid for talking too much. So I think I was born with that. But I was also quite a shy individual back then, and I think I've shucked that off. So a little bit of both, probably. Yeah.
Great answer. Best app or digital tool that you recommend people use?
The two that I probably use the most are a thing called Alien Blue, which is if you're a Reddit user, it's a iOS app. Which is absolutely fantastic third-party app. And I recently switched from the Apple podcast app, which is a mess, to a thing called Overcast, which is really, really good. You have to pay for it. It's like $10 a year or something, but it's a fantastic podcast app.
Awesome, Overcast. Yeah. I haven't heard of that one, so I need to look into it. Awesome, cool. Well, great place to start, and love asking this question because it's so open and you can take it where you want. But who is Brett Roberts?
Who's Brett Roberts? So, born and bred Kiwi, spent most of my life living and working in Auckland. Moved to a place called Te Puna, which is just outside Tauranga, about 8.5 years ago. I've got 3 kids, all in their 20s. One of them's a structural engineer, one of them's a qualified nurse, one of them's doing physics at Auckland Uni, so they're all way smarter than I am. I've started out my career as an avionics engineer with Air New Zealand, so I worked on aeroplanes and did aeroplane things for 13 years, and I've been in the kind of tech quote unquote space since the 90s, I guess, sometime. So
wow.
Yeah, pretty boring individual, really. But yeah.
not at all. We're about to unpack that. But what has your career journey looked like? So already can tell it's quite diverse. But how has that come about?
So I think I'm the wrong person to talk to about career planning. It's non-linear or somewhat random and chaotic. I've tended to chase bright, shiny things that look interesting. I like a challenge. I like to use my brain. I like talking to people. I really enjoy roles where I've got to sit down and really get into the nitty-gritty of problems that people are facing, then try and figure out solutions, tech-based kind of solutions to that sort of stuff. And I've done a fair bit of presenting work, fronting PR, communication stuff while I was at Microsoft. I enjoy that kind of thing as well. I like the science of communication, and I've always found it interesting working in the tech field, trying to take such incredibly complex concepts and technologies and turn them into language that the people that need those things can understand, which tends to be not a strength of the tech sector.
Yeah. So true. What does life look like now? And day in the life of Brett.
So at the moment I'm working for Callaghan Innovation as a business innovation advisor. So that is a really interesting role. Get to see a lot of predominantly early stage, but also growth stage Kiwi businesses in the tech sector.
Yeah.
Almost focused solely in the software as a service sector. So getting to see that stuff up close is quite amazing and inspiring and occasionally terrifying. The rate at which these companies are growing, the potential that they have to grow into, because most of them are global from day one, is absolutely incredible. And watching that journey, the journey those entrepreneurs go through, they kind of start with a great idea and then all of a sudden have a tiger by the tail and have to hire lots of people and figure out strategy and marketing and sales and all sorts of other things along the way. That's really interesting. I do a lot of reading about the sector and stuff like that. And I'm a generally lazy individual, like just lying around reading a book, watching something interesting as well. So
awesome.
I guess that's a typical day.
Yeah.
Oh, and coffee.
Yeah, and coffee.
And beer. Yeah.
Nice. How many coffees a day?
Oh, probably too many. I don't know, 3 or 4. Not too bad.
Three or 4.
It's been worse in the past.
I'm like quite happy with 2 coffees a day. I feel like ripped off if I don't get my second coffee of the day. But 3, 4, 5. That's a whole nother level.
It's an interesting drug, caffeine. It's it's a performance enhancing drug, right? And I was listening to an interesting podcast on. In fact, it might have been Cara Swisher's podcast. She has a podcast called Sway, where she interviewed a guy who was talking about different drugs and why certain drugs are viewed by society in some ways, and other drugs, caffeine being a great example, are viewed as perfectly acceptable and almost desirable. It was quite interesting. But I can't get through a day without a coffee. I've tried doing the decaf thing, not
the same. It is not the same.
No, it's not the same. It's wrong.
It is wrong. Funny. What is one thing that you wish you knew when you began your career / business?
There's probably 100 things, or even maybe 100,000 things. Being Brett, actually. I think there have been times in my career where I have tried to conform to a role or an expectation of a role. And I think one of the things I've learned over time is you can only wear someone else's cloak for a short period of time. So I've kind of gotten past that. So I think that's the first thing. And the other really important thing I learned while I was at Microsoft, actually, one of the most powerful things I've learned is leave your ego at home. I've been one of the great privileges of my career is I've had the opportunity to work with so many incredibly smart people. And people, way cleverer than I am. And I think it's a very humbling and high growth experience to be in a room of people and kind of wander in with your opinion. In the middle of that meeting realise that you're wrong and turn that around and walk out, to do the thing that someone else suggested, not the thing that you did. So, I think that be me and leave your ego at home are probably 2 of the important things. Yeah, 2. Along with another 100,000 things. Yep.
Yeah, totally. What motivates you to get up in the morning?
Coffee. So
there's a theme here.
Yeah, there's a theme here. In all honesty, the work that I'm doing at the moment for Callaghan is pretty motivating stuff. So, I won't bore you with all the numbers, but we think that the SaaS, software as a service sector, has a genuine opportunity to transform the Kiwi, New Zealand economy over the next 10 years or so, out to say 2030. And there's a lot of things to be done in between now and then, but we're a pretty low wage economy. We're going backwards on a whole bunch of metrics. Our economic future is not looking bright. And the SaaS sector as a whole has an opportunity to kind of change that, so to play a tiny part in a very large machine that's looking to do that is both, a genuine honour, but it's motivating. It's really motivating.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a great answer. I love how you sort of said that your career journey has not looked linear. It's, it's looked like whatever the shiny thing.
Random, I think is the word.
Random, there we
Rando,
go. Yeah. Following from that, what is an example of a bold career move or step that you took along that journey, and what did you learn from it?
Probably the boldest thing I ever did was leaving Microsoft. I'd been there for 13 years. I left in 2010. Yeah. and if I had stayed, my bank balance would look a lot healthier today than it probably does, just from a stock perspective. So I thought long and hard about whether leaving then was the right decision, but it was. I was kind of heading into the unknown, but I'd done the things I wanted to do. I'd learned a ton of stuff. I didn't want to go and work in the States, which kind of narrowed things down a bit. So yeah, that at the time was pretty bold. There was a number of my colleagues and friends who, wanted to make sure I'd seriously considered the decision. But yeah, it was a good call, and I've learned so much since then that I wouldn't have. So with the benefit of hindsight, it was a good call. At the time, it was a scary call.
Yeah.
But yeah,
totally.
that would be it.
Yeah, nice. And I think that's encouraging. I think whether that's in business or as a business leader, you can get to a point where you maybe have hit your peak in where you're at. Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing too is that things probably won't ever get as bad as you think they might. I have a tendency to overanalyze, as my other half will tell you gleefully. I do. I sometimes just spend far too much time thinking about, oh my God, this will go wrong. But it did blow me away once I left the network that I had. In fact, maybe going back to one of the previous questions, one of those strengths things might be that I consciously, in my time at Microsoft, built my network out. Right.
It was while I was there that I actually started my first interactions with the Icehouse, and I got to see particularly people like Andy Hamilton. That was probably the God level skills when it came to networking.
Yes.
And the power of that, the ability to be able to connect people in particular. I've done a lot of that over the years.
Great.
So yeah, not sure I answered the question, but
no, you did. It's brilliant. Yeah, and similar. I don't know. This may be similar, it may not. But career highlight and low light.
I'm not sure I've had a low light. There's I can't think of anything that really jumps out as being, oh my God, I wish this never happened.
That's a good thing.
There's been a couple of times where I've had to disestablish roles, and I hated that. They were for good business reasons. It was handled well, but that didn't make any of it any better. So yeah, maybe if I had to call out a low light, that would probably be it. But it also taught me the power of having hard conversation, or the importance of having hard conversations. So yeah, that might be it. And highlight, highlight. I've done all sorts of interesting bits and pieces. What would be a real highlight? I don't know. I had a lot of fun. I had a role while I was at Microsoft, and my title was Director of Innovation. And it's interesting when you've got a title like that, which can mean anything. You can pick the phone up, and you're working at a company like Microsoft. You can pick the phone up and call almost anyone to organise a meeting and have a chat. That was fun. That was interesting. So
yeah, and like you said, you love chatting with people.
Yeah, I do. I like sitting down and just asking open-ended questions and spending an hour listening to people, and you can learn so much, and it's interesting. I find that I'm normally not an instant solution kind of person, although I'm an engineer, so I have a tendency to try and solve things instantaneously. But it's amazing once you have those conversations and go away and kind of let your subconscious ponder on them for a little while, how bits and pieces pop up, and this person A should talk to person B, and here's something that might help them. So yeah,
great, that's awesome. What was your introduction to digital and the deep realization of its importance?
So I've been involved in technology for a long time. When I was at intermediate school, I joined what was then the radio club at Wesley Intermediate, which actually literally steered me on the rest of my career. So it was a guy by the name of Richard Roundtree, and it was a ham radio thing. It was amateur radio. I got my ham radio license super early. I was the youngest in New Zealand at the time. So I've been involved in tech since I was literally, 11 or 12 or something. And then I was an avionics engineer, as I said, at Air New Zealand. And I kind of just drifted into the IT side of things. And then I sort of drifted from the IT side of things. I was at a sales role until the late 90s. And then I joined Microsoft. And that was probably where I started to see the power of technology, the real gap between the value that can be delivered and the value that's being realised. I think the sector has not always been that good at ensuring customers extract the value of the things they've invested in. And I really started to get a bit of a bee in my bonnet for the New Zealand business scene. I felt that we were kind of lagging behind. I then, a couple of roles down the track, wound up as chief executive of a digital agency here in Tauranga called Cucumber. And again, got to work with all these awesome people. One of the great highlights of my career, actually going back a question or two, is I have a knack for walking into organisations with amazing people. I don't know if it's serendipity or whatever it is, but I'm not questioning it. It's been awesome. And that was an eye-opener for me about the power of, I guess, digital quote-unquote technologies, what can be done, and again, how few companies were truly leveraging that stuff. And also the importance of being able to tell that story to customers, right? You know, they've all been bamboozled by tech in the past. They've all got a horror story to tell about tech. So figuring out how to have those conversations with them, that's kind of where it all grew from. And then I had a role at Datacom, where I was very fortunate to kind of help steer them in the direction, in a slightly different direction from a digital perspective. They were approaching everything from a kind of it's all about the tech viewpoint, and we steered that over to, it's more around business, customers, and innovation. And that practice now is going absolutely gangbusters. They're doing some great work. So
must be cool to see. Been part of many awesome organisations, which is cool, and you would have seen a lot of change in digital over your years. I can imagine that would have been a lot of change. Cool. Yeah. When a business owner asks you, where can I start on my digital journey? Where do you direct them, and where can they start? I think even over conference had a few interesting conversations with business owners going, you know, it's good hearing this, but where is the best place to just start somewhere? Yeah.
There's a few different ways of doing this, right? So one is start with customers. I think every business now has to be customer obsessed, not centric, obsessed, right? Yeah. So every company I've ever worked for has looked me in the eye at some stage and told me they're a customer-centric company. And bless their cotton socks, they believe it. I'm just not sure that they were. I think these days you have to be customer obsessed. You know, Apple's customer obsessed, Netflix is customer obsessed, Amazon is customer obsessed. Air New Zealand used to be customer obsessed. I'm not sure they are so much anymore these days. So I think start with customers, start with competitors. What are they doing that you know keeps you awake at night? Start with thinking kind of above the line and below the line. Where are areas I can market and sell, improve the way in which I market and sell my products? How can I create new products? How can I make, below the line, make things more efficient and more effective? So I think those are good places to start. And then there's two other approaches really that I kind of recommend. One is start with a blank sheet of paper. So if you're going to build your business today in light of the technology that's available, how would you go and rebuild it from scratch? Blank sheet of paper, no kind of budget. And the flip side of that coin is if you wanted to destroy your business as a competitor, what would you do? How would you leverage technology to do that? And then you've got an idea of the risks. So that's kind of an opportunity and risk lens to look at things through. So there's multiple places to start. The key thing is that when to start, and when to start was yesterday, but today's good too. So and I don't think it's something that businesses can't do anymore. They must do.
Absolutely brilliant answer. That's cool. How important is a clear purpose when it comes to innovation and strategy?
I run hot and cold on the concept of purpose-led businesses, purpose-driven businesses, because I don't know what Amazon's purpose is, and I don't know what Apple's purpose is, and I don't know what Netflix's purpose is, and I don't know what the Corner Garage's purpose is, but I use them all, right? But I do know they're customer obsessed, and they do a good job of what they do, right? So I'm not sure about the purpose thing from that perspective. But from the point of view of innovation, I think the important things are understanding that innovation requires creativity. And so if you have an environment that's not conducive to creativity, if you don't have a truly psychologically safe environment, I think you will struggle. In fact, it just won't happen. And you also need space to do that in. So expecting people to do their day job and produce and be creative is a challenge, and it probably won't work. And so what I recommend companies do is they embrace experimentation. So I've never been a fan of this concept of failing fast. The word fail does not work for a lot of people. Boards don't like it, investors don't like it, most people don't like it. So, but embracing experimentation is about having a hypothesis, some way of testing it, and then learning. The worst case scenario is you've learned that you probably shouldn't do that and don't do any more of it.
Yeah.
The best case scenario is you've found a new way to do something or a new thing to do. So yeah, I think is purpose really important from an innovation perspective? Yeah, maybe, but I think customer obsession is probably the key thing, and then engineering the culture within the organisation to make it happen.
Any other tips to better innovation in the workplace? I like what you said there around, it's a really key point that as a business owner you're wanting your team to produce and to get things done and to be efficient, but then when you need creativity, it doesn't always come hand in hand. Yeah. Any tips around creating that space in the workplace?
So the first response to that would be, you will be amazed at how many of the answers your people have to questions that you might not be asking yet. The second, I guess the corollary to that is have the right questions, right? Figure out what it is you're trying to solve, what the problems are, what the opportunities might be. I think the psychological safety thing is absolutely critical. I've never worked in a psychologically safe environment. In fact, most people haven't.
Wow.
I've worked in environments where they are at times, or parts of those environments, psychologically safe. And I can put my hand on my heart and say that I've really tried, when I've led teams, to make those teams, our environments, psychologically safe. But that is really difficult. Any organisation where you've been in a meeting and you've had an idea or something's popped into your head, and then another bit of your brain's gone, don't say that, you might look like a dick. It's probably not entirely psychologically safe. So the psychological safety thing is absolutely critical. You need to make sure that everybody feels empowered to surface and table ideas, thoughts, comments, feedback, without fear of some sort of retribution, not going to be laughed at, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And to get those ideas as far up the food chain as possible, as quickly as possible, not kind of vanillarize them as they go through the different levels of the organisation. That's an absolutely key part of it. And again, that space between productivity and creativity, I think, is absolutely critical. I think giving people the opportunity to learn to be creative. Everybody is creative, and everybody can be more creative. It's not embedded in your DNA. It's just embedded in where we are as humans, right? Giving people that opportunity to be creative without having to worry about zipping back to their desk and answering email or doing whatever it is they do for their day job, I think is a key part of that. And the other thing is, there's a really good book called 10 Types of Innovation by Larry Keeley. Go and buy that. It's full of pictures, which is why I like it. And it really does a good job of explaining innovation in plain English. So.
No, it's great. It's really helpful and so great that it's practical, because it's easier said than done, eh?
Yeah, especially
as a business owner going,
Well, it's a skill you have to learn, right? Most people don't, people use the word innovation a lot, but they confuse it with invention.
Wow.
Innovation 0 to 1, invention 0 to 1, innovation's 1 to 1,000. And Kiwis are pretty good at inventing things, but we're actually relatively rubbish at commercialisation and that innovation piece. And those are skills to be learned and invested in. So it doesn't all happen magically, but by the same measure, it's not magic. You can learn all this stuff. Yeah,
it's great thoughts. What does the new way? How people are saying the new way of working. What does that bring up for you? There's a few dimensions to that, right? I think obviously COVID's changed a lot of things, right? But I mean, people were looking at more remote work, etc., way before COVID came on the scene. So I think COVID's accelerated some of that. COVID has also, I think, caught, both because there are people taking it out of the workforce, without a doubt, worldwide, unfortunately. But also it's got a lot of people questioning, what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I think all of a sudden there is this kind of phenomenon of maybe people don't want to sit in a car for an hour and a half twice a day to get to a place in the middle of a city and sit in a
cubicle farm or whatever it is to do the thing that they can do perfectly well in their spare bedroom.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a realisation, I think, that things can be better from a life perspective.
Yeah.
And I see some companies absolutely latching onto that and really running with the remote, work as an option. And others more traditionally digging their toes in. There are obviously a lot of jobs that can't be done remotely, but actually there are a ton of jobs that absolutely can. I think if you're early in your career, you want to be in an office, you want to be seen. Those that are seen are going to get promoted. That kind of makes sense. But already, there are people in New Zealand who are working remotely for overseas companies and doing really, really well. There are Kiwi companies hiring people overseas to work for them and not expecting them to come to New Zealand. So I think that new way, that's one aspect of the new world of work or new way of work. I think the other one that's interesting is more the cultural shift and what people expect, or the way in which they expect companies to behave. And there's some really good books out there around culture. There's a great book by Reed Hastings, who's the chief executive of Netflix, around how they built the culture of empowerment within Netflix. And I think that's a big part of it as well. So I think that the whole, and going to the Dan Pink stuff of autonomy, mastery and purpose, I think organisations that are willing to invest in their people, hire the right people, empower them, help them achieve mastery, help them get really good at what they do, give them a purpose, of some sort that overarches taking home a paycheck. That's a key part of it as well. And I think those organisations that work out how to combine those things will be the ones that win the talent war. And of course, those that don't will be in that position of kind of the double whammy position of A, not having A-grade talent, and B, not having A-grade talent when their competitors do have A-grade talent. So I think it's one of those areas that if I was a HR professional, chief executive or something like that, I'd be thinking long and hard about, because I think it's tactically they have no choice but to participate in some way if they want to attract the best talent. So the world's definitely changing. I think it's a really good thing. I think we've been too long stuck in this mindset that kind of came from the Industrial Revolution. I think it's about time we thought differently, acted differently.
Yeah, totally. It's good that we had a bit of a shake-up.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think COVID just pushed a fast-forward button, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Shifting gears a little bit, what digital emerging trends interest you the most?
I think obviously the whole cloud phenomenon, which isn't exactly emerging. I mean, it's been emerging since the early 2000s, I guess. But more and more companies latching onto that and understanding how, getting somebody else to feed and water their hardware and a lot of their software stacks so that they can do great stuff on top of it. Just pay, per month or per person per month. I think that's a really powerful thing that's still got a long way to go. I think the world of artificial intelligence offers huge opportunity for, particularly in the area of doing the mundane stuff, freeing humans up to do the stuff we're good at, that machines struggle with, and letting artificial intelligence do that kind of drudge work. I think is a good thing. And the third one would probably be the democratization of tech. And I look at things like the phenomenon of low code, where these tools are coming out that enable people, business people, to craft their own software-based solutions to problems. It's a bit like Excel macros on steroids kind of thing, or Visual Basic and those types of things in the past. There are tools now that enable someone that's, capability of being good at Excel to go and build their own apps, build their own software, build their own, kind of join to the dots together on their own ERP systems, for example. I think that's really cool because the biggest challenge in the software world is, the software being built, by technology people, as I said earlier, delivering value to the business people buying it, and often there's a lot of configuration and custom coding and all that sort of thing. It's big and it's expensive. I think people being able to do some of this stuff themselves. Quick and dirty isn't quite the right term. Quick's the right term. Maybe slightly less polished rather than dirty. But I think that's a fantastic phenomenon that I'm really behind. I think anything that gets software tools into the hands of business people in an expedited manner is a good thing.
Yeah, and just means more will
that's
put
it.
their hand up to be
Look, the world runs on Excel, right? And I've seen stunning things built atop of Excel, and now there's all these other tools out there. Power Platform from Microsoft, and that enable people to build literally their own apps. If you're good at Excel and you're willing to go and do a couple of weeks of training, you can start to do that sort of thing. So I think that's a really exciting part of this. In fact, that's one of the things we'll cover off in the webinar series is exactly that. Just the power of these tools and what they can be used for.
Yeah, that's cool. Looking forward to hearing how that's integrated into digital transformation as well, which would be great. How do you stay on the pulse of all those things? It must be a lot of reading, and any key places you go or any key things you do? Twitter. Yeah, nice.
I can't remember how long it is since I've been on Twitter, but it's a long time, probably awesome. 2007, 2008. Wow. And I've always found it to be a great way of kind of tapping into the zeitgeist. I follow all sorts of really interesting people. And so that's a great way of kind of a high volume feed that I can pick bits and pieces out of. That podcast I mentioned right at the beginning, Pivot Podcast, is actually a great way of kind of understanding the intersection of tech, business and society. So I find that to be, particularly when you listen to it on 1.5 speed and zoom through it at pace. Awesome. That's kind of it. There is a bunch of areas I'd be dangerous touching a lot of technologies these days. But I see myself, I think in the past I was a technologist working with businesses, and now I'm more of a business guy helping them with technology. So
great. It's flipped.
Yeah.
Nice. You are co-facilitating the Icehouse Digital Transformation Program, which we has unpacked in this podcast, which is cool. It's launching soon. What excites you most about this program?
I think it's the opportunity to demystify, debullshit the whole digital transformation thing. I am not a big fan of the term itself. I think the technology vendors have focused very much on the digital part of it, obviously, and transformation suggests that there's some sort of end state, and there really isn't. I think one of the big points we'll get across in this series is to get people to understand that they need to get into a cycle of continuous transformation. I'm not even sure if there is a word for that in English language, but that's what they need to get used to as business leaders. They need to be embracing that and driving that in their organisations. So I think it's the opportunity to get that across to business owners and business leaders that can do something about it in a way that doesn't involve selling them something. I think that's the other challenge as well. I think the minute, all of the large vendors have amazing offerings in the space, and they've got great marketing engines and behind all of that. But I think decoupling the product part of it and actually approaching this from a business angle, it's really about transforming your business. It just happens to be digital technologies will use to do that. The analogy would be, if we went back 100 and something years, it'd be like, how do you transform your business now that electricity is freely available via holes in the wall, right? So it's a similar sort of thing. Every company is a software company or a technology company, or should be. And so, what we want to do is help business owners and leaders understand why that should be, and remove the fear part. I want these business owners and leaders to feel empowered to go and drive this change themselves, and not feel it's something that they don't understand or need to delegate or whatever.
Absolutely brilliant. And speaking in their language, that's it. We probably need a fine jar if anyone uses acronyms but the whole idea is really not to focus on specific technology. We'll obviously cover off some stuff, but more around key concepts, and to make it in language, make sure the language is something that business owners and leaders understand. Something we talked about in the webinar recorded yesterday was empowering the business owners to be able to sit with their marketing managers, sit with their digital teams, and speak their language.
That's exactly it, and that's one of the opportunities I see with this, and that addresses one of the fears I have, which is I think that the gaps between business owners and leaders and those people, marketers, etc., is widening when it comes to the technology side of things. I'm not sure that's a good thing. I think you need those owners and leaders to really at least understand the key concepts, some of the language, some of the metrics and other things like that.
Yeah, for sure, totally. What can people expect? Well, we've kind of covered what people can expect in general from the program, but anything else that you'd like to cover in that space?
There's a coaching aspect to it, which I think is really cool. I'm quite excited about. So I find with these types of things, we will flood people with information without a doubt. There'll be a little bit of an information tsunami. And I really like the idea of people being able to go away and just kind of let that percolate at the back of their brain. And then flag interesting questions or points or clarifications or whatever it might be. And have some people to bounce that off that again aren't trying to sell them something. So I think that's a really cool part of this. There's a million places to start. There's a million things you could do. The metrics of where you could do and what you could do in that space, or where you can do something and what you could do is just a huge number of permutations. So I think being able to help people kind of make those first tentative steps is a really cool part of all of this.
Yeah, that's great. And the coaching element, means that it's then very specific to the business owner and to their business, and frameworks around that they can then implement into their own business rather than general, which is really cool. Nice. Finishing up the podcast, who's been someone that's been really influential in your journey, in your career or business journey?
Good question. Certainly the guy that hired me into Microsoft, Jeff Laurie, for empowering me. It was the first time I'd ever been in a role where he literally sat me down. I was running a particular part of the business for Microsoft New Zealand, and he said to me, "This is your business. These are the resources that we'll make available to you. These are the sales targets or whatever it might be that we have. It's your business. You figure out what to do." He also did at the end, "Don't F it up." But so that was pretty powerful. That was the first time I'd ever had someone really drop that in my lap, and he meant it. And I had an absolute ball running that business. Worked with a great bunch of people, learned a lot again. But it felt like my business. And the other person I'd probably call out is the guy that I co-founded my consulting business with, Alex Broughton, who was a colleague at Microsoft as well. And I've learned so much from him over the years. Very, experienced business person with incredible people skills and amazing sales skills. So I've been very fortunate to, co-found a business with him and learn from him as well. So but in all honesty, they're two of probably hundreds. I've been very fortunate to work with some absolutely incredible people over the years. So for the other 98 at least that I've left out, I apologise, but those are the two that spring to mind.
I always love listening to those at the end of podcasts and going, that's awesome, and then thinking, I wonder how many people, if they were to be interviewed, would say you,
I don't know.
And the impact that you've had. No, but I think there's a few out there. Awesome. Love to end on a bit of a fun note. Fun fact that not many people know about you.
How about, while I was at Air New Zealand years ago, I spent 6 or 8 months working the flight simulator section, so I got to be a really good 747 and 767 pilot.
Yes.
How about that?
Nice. I like that.
I'd be dangerous now, but it's pretty good.
That's fun. I like that. Honestly, really great to sit down and have this conversation. Cool that it's in person here in Tauranga. But those listening, I'm sure that they'd love to hear about your history, your background, your career, and those about to jump on the digital transformation program. Looking forward to meeting you as well as you co-facilitate that with Kevin. So thanks heaps for your time today and sharing your story.
Cool. Thanks, Brian. It was fun.
No worries.